right? People make more money and there's more efficiency and that sort of thing. And that's where I was coming from. It wasn't until later in life that I came to libertarianism from what I would call the left-hand side, which is what I would say the ethical side. You pointed out a few examples. I had initially become frustrated with the Republican Party over fiscal conservatism, right?
What fiscal conservatism?
Yeah, I go way back to George Herbert Walker Bush, who was my boss's 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 boss for a little while when I worked for the White House in the Office of Management and Budget. When he said, "Read my lips, no new taxes," right? And then, of course, before the ink was dry on that transcript, he eventually agreed to new taxes. That's tough. If you're young, like I was in those days, I was probably 28 or 27 when he said it. And you're a young, impressionable, fiscally conservative Republican, and you're in grad school, and the president goes back on that pledge. That's a turning point for it. That's hard. That's hard to swallow.
Was that the first time you heard a politician lie, or what?
Yeah, maybe. It's funny you say that. I'm the guy who used to hang in there with politicians, right? I was 13 in 1974, 14 in 1975. I swear I was the last human in America who believed that Richard Nixon couldn't possibly be a crook, right? You're 13 or 14, and remember, until Watergate, we hadn't had Watergate, right? Until Watergate, I think a lot of folks, a lot of grown-ups, not just a lot of 13-year-olds, a lot of grown-ups were much more deferential, or at least much more expectant of some honesty in politicians. Maybe not honesty is quite the right word, but you certainly didn't expect the president of the United States to be burglarizing the Democratic headquarters in the Watergate Hotel, right? In fairness, I think you wouldn't be shocked to find out if that happened today. But you'd be like, wow, that would be slightly surprising. But in those days, it was, I just couldn't believe it. As a 13-year-old, 14-year-old, I couldn't believe it. So yeah, by the time George Herbert Walker Bush said that, I guess it wasn't completely my first rodeo with dishonest politicians, but certainly it was a more naive time than it is today.
That might be fair, but I also, to sort of steel man, us old people that grew up before the internet, media was captured. You had Operation Mockingbird. The CIA was controlling the narrative. Like, you had this one-way information door that went from the government directly into everyone's eyeballs, and everyone was on the same page in their belief. Because what else do you have, right? Like, you had like three major channels: ABC, NBC, CBS, and PBS, if you count them. Nobody watches that. But you got the same information flow. Every anchor said the same thing. Like, every channel, the local news said the same thing. And it felt like, and I think there's some positives and negatives. Like, number one, like, everybody was just sort of cohesive as a society because you got the same narrative. Nobody felt like you were completely getting screwed all the time. Whereas now,
there is cohesion in the dark.
There definitely is, and that it makes it a lot easier to burglarize people, to steal from people, and to pull shenanigans and do all sorts of horrible things.
Does. One of the things that I think that we lose track of in our old age is the extent to which, I don't go all the way back to Eisenhower, but we've all read it. When Eisenhower warned us about the military-industrial complex, today that sounds like of course, right? It's a throwaway line. Like, who needs to be told this? Well, in 1960, that was a big statement, and it took some guts, and it would have been difficult for someone who had not been a 5-star general. It would have been difficult for someone else to say it, right? That was a very important. The reason we remember that is because it was such an important statement. Today, it doesn't sound so interesting, but It was a big deal in those days.
Yeah, it definitely was. And I think that opened a lot of people's eyes. And he, like you said, he was the right person to deliver that message. He had the cachet and he had the
Yeah.
credibility to say it.
Yeah.
And now it seems like we all accept it. And I don't know if it's just me, but it feels like everyone just like there's nothing you can do about it. Like this military industrial complex is going to get fed no matter what. And I think the most prescient example that we have right now is current president Donald J. Trump,
Yeah.
who just last week says, "Oh, $1 trillion a year is not enough. I need to add 500 billion to that. We need a 1.5 trillion military budget." And it's just campaigning on no new wars, campaigning on reining in spending, and what do we get? We get profligate spending and massive increase in the
More
military
spending and
industrial.
more wars.
Yeah, totally. So
Well,
it seems
we haven't had a really big war yet. We just have lots of little ones yet. Maybe that's what he meant. He meant he won't give us a big one. The problem with the little ones, in my view, we'll come back to your budget comment because I thought that was so important. The problem with the little ones is you never can be 100% certain they're not going to turn into big ones. The problem I have with these interventions, besides the ethics, the cost, the lost soft power, the illegality, the death, right? Aside from all of that, one of the things that bothers me about the little interventions is it feels like spinning the wheel. It feels like we spin the wheel so often. Everyone says frequently, but I don't know if we take it to heart, that war is chaotic. You never really know how it's going to go. Like Mike Tyson says, everyone's got a plan until someone punches you in the face, right? There's a certain element of randomness. Okay, certain element of randomness, and you're spinning the wheel all the time. So if you tell me, let's pick Venezuela as an example. You tell me the chances of that blowing up into a nuclear exchange that results in, half of an Armageddon, right? The chances of that are really small, really small. But you cannot argue that it's zero, right? If you tell me the chances of that winding up in a world war or a nuclear exchange with Russia or China, that the chances of that are zero, I'm going to say you can't back that up. You cannot back, because at some point you never know when some idiot on the other side of the world, in the case of Venezuela, maybe it's Putin, right? Does something really profoundly stupid. I mean, we're proving all the time that the American government is stupid. Why do we discount the possibility that other governments can be even more stupid than we are? Okay, let's say the chance, work with me here on the math. Let's say the chance of it turning into something that we can't control is only 1%, right? 99%, we're going to be fine. We're going to be able to get out of this. It's going to cost us a lot of money. People are going to die. Lost efficiency, lost ethics, lost soft power, lost dignity, lost alliances, but at least we're not going to lose our way of life over this, right? 99% chance. Okay, 1% chance, total meltdown. Then I say, we're going to do it 100 times. Now, how do you feel about 1%?
1% is quite high when you start talking about the existence of the world as we know it, right? Like that's
1% is a lot. As a matter of, I remember having this feeling. You asked me before we came on the show if there's anything I don't want to talk about. I don't want to talk about the following thing that I'm going to bring up. Okay. For the sake of anonymity, someone in my family was diagnosed with cancer at one point.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
They're okay. They're okay. The doctor comes in and says, chances of this, chances of beating this, 91%. 91%, according to the data. I got to tell you, I have never heard such a small fucking number in my whole life. Right? He comes 91. What do you mean 91? I'm looking for 99.91. right? Don't give me this 91 stuff. Don't give me 91. Don't give me 99% chance we're going to be okay in Venezuela. That's a small number. You get my point.
I do. You know, the unintended consequences are a real problem. I think the military industrial complex, the government at large, I don't think they care. I think to them it's heads they win, tails you lose, right? So if there are unintended consequences, they just win bigger.
They're getting paid one way or another.
Exactly. And so for that, the people that are making these decisions about the lives of the troops, and I'm a veteran, so I was, part of that whole military industrial complex. I got to see it from the inside. They don't care about the soldiers. They don't care about anything but profits. And for them, if you have, oh, whoops, well, I guess I caused a geopolitical conflict and it's just like ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. Then you have an emergency and the emergency.
Someone's going to have to buy more weapons.
Yeah, so the military industrial complex contractors, the DoD contractors, make out like gangbusters. The national security apparatus makes out like gangbusters, and government gets to exert more control because, as you know, emergencies are always a pretext for them to ratchet back liberty and to exert more control over our lives. So it's
but you would never have a president who abused his ability to reference some make-believe emergency. That wouldn't happen.
Never happens. Which is why I'm so I gotta say this.
Not a Republican. A Republican would never do that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, man, it's like, what is going on? Because it seems like the Republicans we have in office right now who ran on all this stuff, the opposite of everything we're doing. It's just naked aggression, and the SEALs are clapping. I'm seeing, I mean, there's a split for sure, but I'm seeing a big portion of the Republican Party that is just cheering for this stuff. The most awful things, whether it comes to the big beautiful bill and massive spending and hyperinflation, endless wars, the Palantir expansion of the surveillance
just to name a half dozen.
Yeah, I mean,
by the way, I noticed you had that list that came trippingly off thy tongue fairly easily.
Mike, I think about this a lot, man.
Yeah, like, I can tell. I can tell. I hope you're sleeping okay at night.
I mean, I do, because I'm very keenly aware that I can't fix anything. And so maybe this is where we differ. Maybe here's a point of contention between us, because I don't think political action is going to do anything. I don't think that anybody that's engaging with a political apparatus is going to move the needle in any substantive way at all. And so I'm focused on, okay, what's my locus of control? And so we are bugging out off-grid homestead in rural Tennessee and preparing for whatever eventuality may come, because I look around and it's not just that the government's out of control, but the citizenry. I look at my friends and my neighbors and just the general tone and tenor online, and people in my country, it pains me to say this. I say this with no joy whatsoever, but they don't like liberty. They hate it. They seem to really detest freedom because it comes with personal responsibility. Those two are inextricably linked, and I think America's wholesale rejected the concept of liberty.
I don't know that you're wrong. By the way, you are right that this is a point of contention between us, but only in the sense that let me characterize the debate about our ability to affect things as a sliding scale, right? I'm not going to hold you to the notion that you believe there's a 0% chance that politics can move the needle. And I'm not going to try to convince you that we have a 100% chance of affecting some change through the political process. But at the very least, I'm at a 51 and you're at a 49. The reason I don't sleep well at night is because I don't think it's 100, right? And if I were convinced that I'm going to save the day, Brent, right? The Republican Liberty Caucus that I recruit for, we're going to save the Republican Party. The Republican Party is going to save the Republic, and the Republic is going to save the world. That's a nice story. Could happen, could happen. But because I'm not 100% sure, I don't sleep well at night. And one of the things that concerns me is the personal characterization of the personal aspect of this. In other words, I don't want to, I'm 64 years old. I don't want to look back 20 years from now and wonder whether I could have moved the needle and I didn't try. You get where I'm going?
I do.
And
Yep.
if there's a shot, I need to take it, right? If there's a shot, I need to take it. Back to what we were talking about before, the 99 and the 1. You know, if someone were to tell you and me, you two idiots have a 1% chance of saving the world. Really? I was only looking to move the needle, not to save the whole world myself. If you had a 1% chance of saving the world, but you got to go balls to the wall. You would do it, right? You would do it. I don't know what the chances are. I don't know the arithmetic, but I do know that that's my attitude. That this government is going to go down the tubes over my dead body. And it might. It might go down the tubes over my dead body, but it's gonna have to. I'm gonna go down swinging.
And I appreciate that, and I certainly don't denigrate anybody who's out there trying to make a difference. I'm not here to say my way is the right way. I'm just telling you.
Oh, and by the way, I do have a nice collection of shotgun shells and two shotguns hidden in the house. So I'm certainly not denigrating your strategy either.
Yeah, it's not even a strategy so much. I think it is just an acceptance of
Yeah.
objective reality. You know, I'm a computer scientist by trade. I work in a big tech company. I've been doing it a long time, and so I'm really good at math. You know, and I look at the the writing on the wall, and it's just I don't see a mathematical way out of this. You know, when you have the biggest mandate we've ever seen for cutting government. I'm talking about Donald Trump's presidency, right? Like we had
Right.
Elon, we had Doge, all this bullshit, all this marketing PR that was shoved down everyone's throat, and we're going to bring in Ron Paul, and we're going to bring and we're going to cut, and we're
Right.
going to and the second he gets in office, what's the first thing he does? Like he passes this continuing resolution to jack up spending way above Biden levels,
And then starts taxing our international trade.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's a whole other story. But I get so tired of the idiots who tell me that the foreigners are paying for tariffs because I'm like, my God, like I work in this space. I know that the importer of record is the one who pays the damn tariffs, which is always an American. It's so
It's
annoying.
always an American, and in this case, the vast majority of the burden of the taxes is on Americans as well. To your point, I am surprised. By the way, most of what happens in the world surprises me. Later on, we'll talk about some of the stupid predictions I've made in my lifetime. So, if I tell you the sun is coming up tomorrow, you might want to check the newspaper. Um, I am shocked by the extent to which, and the number of which, Republicans who, until a year ago, right, thought that tariffs were evil, will stand on their head to come up with these contorted white papers and social media campaigns and verbal oral arguments to support tariffs that never even crossed their mind before. I mean, it was just accepted libertarian dogma, accepted Republican positioning that we don't like taxes, right? We don't like taxes, but you change the word from tax to tariff, and you put the president of the United States behind it, and all of a sudden, oh, maybe I do like yogurt. Maybe I like Greek yogurt. Maybe I like Greek yogurt with no sugar. Maybe I like it on my ham sandwich. Like, what is wrong with you? It's
It's not
unbelievable.
it's not just the Republicans though. I see this as an endemic problem across the entire political
Oh,
landscape of the United States. Like, for
that's just
example,
our example.
yeah, I mean, this is what frustrates me, I guess, as being an old timer when I'm trying to talk to these young people. I was like, I remember a time where reliably a conservative, Republican, whatever, I could think, okay, you're Republican. I know I like 80% about your views on economics, about
Right,
domestic policy, about fiscal
right.
policy. Like I could sort of generally know, triangulate where you
Yep.
are.
Right.
And then a liberal, like, okay, I could pick where you are. I have a great idea
Right.
of where you are. But now there's no core to anybody, it seems, in politics. They switch sides depending on when they gain power. I think the most recent example, the most prominent example, is the COVID shots. So, when Trump
Yep.
was doing Operation Warp Speed, all of the Democrats, and I'm talking up and down, were like, we're not taking the Donald Trump shot. Hell no. This all the
Right.
arguments that
Joe
Republicans now
Biden
use.
said he wouldn't take the shot if it was developed under Trump.
Exactly. And so you see this weird thing where as soon as the power shifts, they completely, like you said, stand on their head and they will make the exact opposite argument they made
Now it's a good
5 minutes.
shot. Not only is it a good shot, but you have to have it or you're going to lose your job.
Yeah, it's so weird, and I've seen that across every dimension, like, for example, like, look when George W. Bush was president, and the left was out, and I was loving it. The left was out in the street protesting the war. I was like, "Hell yeah, we're with you guys, awesome." And then Barack Obama's elected, escalates the war, and then, like, the Dems or the left just goes home. The anti-war left, it evaporated
Right.
overnight. I was like, "What are we doing?"
Right. No, I think it's called politics. And to your point, we were talking about the military industrial complex, which of course is only one example, but it's arguably the, fiscally speaking and ethically the biggest. It, it, uh, so many folks make the argument, correctly make the argument, that there is in some sense a conspiracy afoot, and it's not in the dark shadows. You've got lobbyists out in the open. A lot of money is spent to influence politicians are selling us on the idea of war because of their cozy relationships with these contractors are making a lot of money. Money is sloshing around all over the. This is well understood phenomenon, but the point, all of which is true. But I don't know that you need all of that mechanism, all of the lobbying, all of the bribery and the fraud, right? All of the coercion and corruption, not all of which is illegal. 98% of it is legal, I'm sure, right? You don't need all of that to work very well. A lot of these people are not brain surgeons.
Clearly.
Right. As long as Barack Obama stands up and says, no, this is what we're going to do, Democrats will fall in line. Donald Trump says, this is what we're going to do, Republicans are going to fall in line. In other words, you only need a certain number of centers of influence. You don't need Boeing's lobbying program, their PR campaign, to be that good. They're good at this, but I can't lay it all on their doorstep. That's my point.
You can't, and to be fair, like, every single, you probably know this, like, every single CEO of a major corporation has a fiduciary responsibility to shareholders to maximize profits, and one of the best ROIs you can get is lobbying. Like, if they've done the calculation as far as every dollar invested in lobbying results in like a 10,000x return. It's like it's the cheapest, fastest, easiest way to juice your profits. And so, of course, they have to. And if they don't, their competitor will do it, and they're going to get crushed. So there's perverse incentives involved, and it's just way too damn easy. The access to
It is too easy.
politicians.
That's well said. That's better said than what I said. It's just too damned easy.
Yeah, I mean, the entire system is built on this. And I don't think people realize it, aren't sort of well versed with how laws are made. They sort of naively think that their representative is out there, pen and paper, writing these laws. And no, it's a whole disgusting group of lobbyists in K Street that's just down the street that is
Yep.
writing the actual text of the laws. And then they do horse trading in the back room. So that's like,
That's
well,
exactly
they
right.
just
I used to work in financial services for the big trade association. I was an economist, and we were heavily involved with moving legislation in the House and the Senate, maintained strong relationship with the White House as well. This is the Bill Clinton era, right? It was very difficult for anyone to move legislation in financial services over our dead body, right? Very, very difficult. Once in a while, you could get it done, but very, very difficult. It was an extremely powerful lobby, the bankers. Indeed, there were times when I was personally involved with penning small, teeny bits of language, right, that were going to become federal statute. And the attorneys in our group did it all the time, right? Every month they were penning something, and sometimes it wasn't just a little thing. Sometimes it was, whole paragraphs, and some of it was substantial. Now, in those days, the incentive structure being what it was, and the times and the day that it was, the financial services industry was very, very pro market. It was all about fighting regulations, fighting restrictions on getting into new businesses, getting rid of restrictions. Geographic was a big one, being able to cross state lines, whether it's to branch or provide insurance or whatever. We were always fighting the good free market battle. But not so in every era, right? You go back 20 years before then, it wasn't that way at all. And in most industries, it's not. In many regulated industries, the big fight from the corporate side is to knock down regulations. That is very, very true. But not in every case. There are plenty of examples where corporate America is all about putting up with certain regulations if it protects my position, right? If it prevents someone from coming in and competing with me, if it keeps the big boys in a position that's advantaged and little people can't compete, they're all about a regulation, right? And it's a real shame the way that laws are put together. And a piece of that is that it has become so complicated. The federal government is into everything, right? And the federal government tries to control so much at such a detailed level, more than they're able to handle. And as you know, the vast majority of senators and representatives at the federal level or any level, these people are not brain surgeons. These are these are not people who couldn't decide whether to become surgeons or senators. That wasn't their big decision in life.
And Mike, I got to stop you, 'cause I'm not going to let you denigrate the great Nancy Pelosi, who is the greatest traitor in the history of the world, sir. I will let you know. So please continue.
Well, she has done well. she has done well, and that must be because of her skill on the trading floor, because there's no other way to explain it. It is a shame that we have people who are way out ahead of their skis in terms of their appetite for regulating the world and controlling the world relative to their ability to understand it. And maybe those go hand in hand. The less you understand the world, the more you think it's a good idea to try to control it. I don't know. That's a psychological step that would probably put me ahead of my skis if I tried to figure out what makes these people, do the things that they do. But my point is that when you're trying to control the world at a really detailed level and you don't have the bandwidth or the skill set or the intellectual capacity, you necessarily end up relying on staff, committee staff, especially on the Hill. But to a large extent, you end up relying on lobbyists, trade associations, where the real expertise is, businesses in your district. And if you're lucky, you've got someone smart in your district who's not trying to manipulate you and take advantage of you, but you're lucky if you can find such a person. And it's a bad system.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more there. So let's talk more detail about what your goals are with the RLC. Because I'm on the outside looking in, and I survey the landscape. I look in Congress, I look in the House of Representatives, I look in the Senate, and I see like one guy. I see Thomas Massey, and then I see a whole bunch of commies. Like that's the line of delineation I have. And so when I'm looking at like the RLC, I'm like, okay, cool. I love the idea. We're gonna bring in some more liberty-minded candidates, but the data scientist in me says, well, there's one right now, and he's trying. The president is currently trying to primary him out.
And we might
So
argue that we've got one in the Senate also.
maybe. Mm, mm.
Rand Paul does a much better job than anyone else in the Senate in terms of. I shouldn't try to convince you that this is the only metric that counts, but if you were to look at voting records, Rand Paul does a good job, and he does a better job than other senators.
I will agree there. So he's probably the best in the Senate. I just think that's a damn low bar. And also I have the contrast of comparing him to his dad, and it's just like that's not even in the same universe when I sort of compare those two.
Well,
So
his dad had a certain nerdly charisma that comes from being so dedicated, right, to your philosophy. That was very, very authentic. I'm not trying to suggest that Rand isn't, but his dad has this thing that is not your traditional TV charisma, right?
definitely not. He was not like this well polished, this politician with the gleaming veneers and like all this like aesthetic beauty. He was just this guy that, and you could just tell that he cared so much about
Yeah,
doing the right thing and being principled. And I guess that's where I have the deep and abiding love for that dude. Uh, I'm
absolutely. You
just
got
like
the impression that he would put his head through a brick wall for us if he thought it would matter. He's going to go down swinging. He is a guy who's trying to move the needle. Uh, I think he did. I think you can make an argument that he woke up a lot of people, that our movement, broadly speaking, the liberty movement, is better off for having had him a part of it. And by the way, he was a past chair of the Republican Liberty Caucus,
I
one of the
did know that.
founders.
Yep, I did know that.
One of the founders going back, the caucus was founded in the early 90s, and it had its Ron Paul heyday. It's had its ups and downs. And now we are trying to start state chapters. It has a few state chapters, but we're trying to start a whole bunch more.
You have one
And
in Tennessee?
we are getting one off the ground in Tennessee, and I think you should be a part of that.
I, I'm not sure if I'm there yet, but I'm open to being convinced. I'll put it that way.
I appreciate
We
that.
we have we have we have a dearth of liberty candidates in Tennessee. I've been I moved, by the way. I moved like 4 years ago from Seattle. Escaped like literally, and so got here, and I thought like this is going to be great. There's going to be a lot of people that and relative to Washington, yeah, it's definitely more free here. But the candidates that I see are just god awful everywhere. So I'm
Well, it
ugh.
can't be worse than Seattle.
No, it's definitely not. Definitely, that's about as bad as you can get. And so,
And Nashville is a nice town. I don't know if you live in Nashville or.
I'm just outside Nashville. I'm just maybe 20 minutes outside.
Nashville's nice. Nashville has grown a lot the last few years. I know that not everyone is pro growth when it comes to certain towns, but Nashville has done a good job. It's a nice place to live. By the way, Seattle is a nice town. I hope you had a good experience living there. It's just that
I did for a
the
while. So I raised
liberal
my.
nature of the politics out there will make your head explode.
It's not just that. It wasn't just the politics. I could deal with that. Like I was used to being around that sort of leftist type of person back when it was like liberal, right? But like
Yep.
I have no problem with liberals at all. Like I get along with them. I
Yep.
vibe with them on certain things. But when it transitioned to this like leftist, I'm like literally Marxist,
Yep.
s- city council was completely taken over by Marxists, and everybody
Yep.
up there went so hard left that the
Yep.
city itself, and not just a city, but the suburbs. I lived in a very nice neighborhood on a lake, like 45 miles outside of Seattle, and I
Nice.
saw it in our neighborhoods. Like we had like all these
Yep.
homeless people and drug encampments right behind the
Yep.
grocery store, and I had three
Yep.
daughters, and there was all sorts of like violent
You,
things that
you,
were happening. It was
yeah,
like
you
a
can't have it. You can't have that.
yeah, and for me, that was the backbreaker for me. I was like, look, we cannot stay here anymore. This is unsafe. And they started cracking down on the gun laws. Like, I mean, right as I was leaving, the gun laws became like super restrictive, and it's just like, God, I
Yep.
had to get the hell out of there. But I was not as impressed with Tennessee as I wanted to be. I'm glad we have constitutional carry here. I'm glad that there's no state income tax. There wasn't in Washington either. But it seems like it's that Republican commie thing here, which I just it's and maybe it's just endemic in the fact that the Republican Party has slid so hard left, especially in the last like 10, 15 years, that it's almost intolerable for me anywhere I go. It's just different. There's different issues, these people here are just super authoritarian. I think that's the biggest thing
Yep.
that I see. They want Trump the strong man. They want the dictator. They want the fascism. They want the hyper aggressive police state, and they're cheering for all the ICE stuff and the Palantir survey, like all this
Yep.
stuff. And I'm just like,
Yep.
my God,
Yep.
you people have no idea what you're asking for.
No, they don't. They literally don't. They will learn, I believe, the hard way. I'm just hoping that we learn our lesson relatively quickly.
Neither side learns. They say like, look, we want to give you more power when their person is in charge, not even thinking for 2 seconds how that power is going to be abused once the other side takes over. And it's just this
Yeah, learning is not our shtick as Americans.
boy, and it's tough for me because I'm autistic as hell, and I got a great pattern recognition apparatus, and I see this stuff coming. I'm just like, guys, like, what the hell are you thinking? I try to warn people. I jump up and down and scream. Like I remember before the 2024 election, go through my tweet history. I was like, Trump is a commie. He's an authoritarian leftist. He's going to govern as such. You guys are insane believing this bullshit that and then people are like, there were so many libertarians that just were all aboard the Trump train. Nope, he's going to cut spending and Elon and this and that. And I was like, guys,
Yeah.
I've
Yeah,
seen this movie before. I know the
that
way
was
it ends.
disappointing.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
happen to remember those days, Brent.
yeah, because it was like a year ago. It wasn't very long in the rear view. But boy, there's a
No.
lot of
And at
people.
my age, that's like 10 minutes.
Exactly. But there's a lot of people, to their credit, have apologized. I saw Dave Smith did a huge mea culpa, and
Yep.
Clint Russell. There's like a bunch of people that were, on that train that jumped off pretty vociferously. So
Yep.
I think that was a good development. I think people. It feels like maybe I'm being too optimistic. It feels like a lot of people are starting to wake up that there's no political solution. I think, or maybe the chances of there being a political solution are incredibly slim. When just a year ago they really were full of hope and like, oh, well, maybe this, it's like Charlie Brown in the football. Maybe Lucy's going to let me kick it this time. And I feel like people are getting sick of it. People are really getting fed up with the rug pull, and they keep getting, what's that, Wood's Law. No matter who you vote for, you end up getting with John McCain. Like people are realizing.
Yes. That's a funny line, by the way, and not completely wrong. I think that people, my take on this is that people get disappointed with politics because they don't look at it the right way in the first place. If you were expecting something that just wasn't going to happen, you end up getting disappointed. But that doesn't mean that the whole political apparatus can't work at all. It just means you got fooled by a dude. And I don't mean to suggest that our political apparatus is any good. It sucks, right? But I don't think it's completely fair to say that because Donald Trump tricked a lot of people, therefore our democratic system doesn't work. I get the through line. I get the connected dots. I get the disappointment. I get why you would feel. I have days when I feel that way too. But it's not a 100% lock. You can't just map one onto the other.
Give me your best case then. Make the case. Like, change my mind.
The best case is that the debate that's going to matter in the world, by the way, is going to happen inside the United States. And the debate inside the United States that's going to matter is going to happen inside the Republican Party. And I believe that that is the case because the Democratic Party is not yet to the starting line in terms of engaging in an intellectual way what's going on in the political world. The Democratic Party is still not figuring out why they've been losing recently. They can't figure out why they haven't done well in the polls. They can't figure out why they lost control of the House. They just literally can't figure that out. And in politics, so often change has to come in the form of replacing people. Rarely do you change the minds of certain politicians, right? If your party needs to go in a different direction, needs to go in a different direction with different people. So I think that the debate that's going to matter is going to happen inside the Republican Party. Again, no joy to be had in saying that neither the Democratic Party nor the Libertarian Party is going to play a significant role in American political life. But I think that that's true for different reasons. And that debate is going to take the form of, what does the Republican Party want the legacy of Donald Trump to be? Everyone's going to fight over what is his legacy, right? And I don't know whether it's the smart money, but the money that's ahead right now is the idea that it's going to go toward more nationalism and more protectionism and more authoritarianism, a lot of isms, more toward strongman foreign policy and more spending. And the alternative is in our direction. The alternative is a more traditional set of things that we would have taken for granted that the Republican Party at least would stand up for, at least rhetorically, right, a generation ago, even if it wouldn't execute on it, which is to say more adherence to the Constitution, more of an orientation toward free markets and fiscal conservatism. I think we've learned the hard way that we need to stand up for medical freedom that we all wish we had been doing starting a whole lot of years ago, and learned recently that it's more important than we thought it was. A less interventionist foreign policy, which is a new thing. I don't think that you could make much of a case that either party has stood up for a less interventionist foreign policy until at least Donald Trump gave it some voice 2 years ago. So this is the debate that's going to matter. And I think we've got a couple of shots at it. I think we've got a shot at it over the next 3 years, and I think we have a shot at it over the next 7 years. And the way that you win that debate always comes down to practicality. Seldom do you win a debate by suggesting, here's the intellectual case for it, right? You've got to be able to win hearts and minds through pocketbook, through people not wanting to be embarrassed around the world. And I think the Republican Party can go in that direction, can go in a more, what we would today call more libertarian direction, more of a traditional Republican direction, and less, this nationalistic tendency that the party has been going in the last few years. By the way, to this point, I would suggest that the reason Mamdani won in New York was not per se, it's the economy, stupid, was not per se affordability, all of which is true. You've got to remember that people care about the economy, and affordability really is an issue nationwide, and especially in New York City. Good for him for understanding all that. But the reason he won was because he was able to give rhetoric to what it is that people wanted to hear, right? That's the fundamental nature. Typically, mostly that's economics, right? That's why you can generally say, don't forget the economy. It's the economy, stupid, because that's generally what people want to hear. And if you're talking about something other than economics, you're probably talking about something that people just don't care about. If President Trump were able to give voice to what it is that people really care about now, this year, if he were able to restrain his foreign policy and recognize that inflation sucks and that for years wages couldn't keep up, that it's increasingly difficult to buy a house because of big swings in interest rates and because construction collapsed years ago, and this is a real problem. If he would at least give voice to all this, and I don't think he will, I believe that the Republican Party could hold the House in November. And I don't believe that he can do that based on what I've seen the last few weeks. Until recently, I was saying he could. And not necessarily that I would predict that he would, but that he could. Now I don't know that he even can. Like I don't know that he has it in him. So much is he wed to a foreign policy that is not in alignment with what Americans want, and so much is he blind to the economic issues that people want to hear him talk about. And I don't think he's gonna write that. But if the Republican Party has its ass handed to it because just an inability to align with what it is that people care about, there will be a push for reform. And that necessarily has to go in a libertarian direction.
Yeah, I think you nailed that. That was a very good analysis. I agree with you. I don't think Donald Trump is going to, nor can he, admit the truth with respect to the economy. And not only that, like oh, he pulls out the same bag of tricks. It's like, oh, it's affordability is a Democrat hoax. Now, meanwhile, we all know we've had an inflationary crisis that he's responsible for. I think a lot of people don't realize that he's responsible. I don't know if you know this, Mike, but he's responsible for 22% of all the federal debt that's ever been accumulated from 1776 until today, almost a quarter. And he's only been in office for a little over like 5 years now, like not even 5 years. That is insane. And as you know, being an econ nerd, that is money printing. That's devaluation of the currency. That is causing real pain from the bottom up. That's regressive. That hurts the poorest first and works its way up. That's why I think you're right. Mandami he absolutely can point to the pain that's being felt by the lower, rung of society, and then hey, I've got this solution called socialism. People are like, well, fuck, it's better than whatever Donald Trump is selling. Meanwhile, he's so goddamn tone deaf to where he's decorating the White House in gold. Everything is gaudy gold opulence. He's throwing these giant balls where he's got like literal human beings like F. Scott Fitzgerald novels in giant martini glasses and just opulent parties, and is just doing the Trump coin rug pull, enriching himself, which is probably a bribery scheme. Like everyone's just watching.
It absolutely is. And now we're looking at a ballroom.
Yeah. And so the regular people see this and go, you're full of shit. All you're doing is protecting your own interests and the interest of your corporate cronies. Nobody believes you. No, and I think the problem that the RLC candidates that you're going to put forward, as well as Republicans in general, is they are inextricably linked with that R to Donald Trump, who is just burning the entire house down. And so there's no messaging, I think, that the individual candidates can come up with that's going to reach people. Nobody wants to show up to the polls because, like, we just did this. We got promised all this stuff. We all showed up in mass. There was this giant mandate. We're going to cut spending. We're going to do these
an hour ago.
Yeah, an hour ago. And it's like, you fucked us, guys. Like, we're not doing it. So my prediction is that the midterms are going to be a bloodbath. The Republicans are going to get absolutely rolled, and which is a shame because, like, to your point, Democrats had nothing. They just got trounced. That woke shit was completely, just rejected by the voters. And this all these things that they've been doing for so long are just like, nope, we're not doing this anymore. We're riding with the Republicans. And the news stories around the election time were, will the Democrats ever recover? And in a year, he's taken that victory and destroyed it to the point where, like, I don't know if Republicans are ever going to win again. He's probably going to get impeached.
Defeat from the jaws of victory.
Exactly. It is the most shocking thing I've ever seen, to the point where it can't be incompetence. I really believe, and I'm not conspiratorial. I'm not one of those libertarians, and we have a reputation. I'm not a tinfoil hatter person, but I see the money. And guess what? Israel's calling the shots across the board. Everything is basically being run by AIPAC, and it's like, That's not an anti-Semitic thing to say. That's not a conspiratorial thing to say. That is just a fact, and they admit it. He was like, "Hey, yeah, look, Miriam Adelson, she loves Israel, and she is my biggest donor, and she basically is the most powerful woman in the whole world. Her and Susie Wiles, and sorry everybody, like, and it's I think that's really what it is. Like he's just bought and sold, and he doesn't have any choice. And I think a lot of it stems from the fact that he had to make some uncomfortable deals when he was facing all those felonies. His choice was either I become president or I spend the rest of my life in prison. And I think that he took that Adelson money, and now the bills due.
Well, I appreciate that. I think that there's 25 different centers of pressure points for President Trump. But I also think that there's 25 weird pressure points going on inside of him. And I just think that he probably always had certain things that he wanted to do that are just weird, that he was surrounded by a staff that hemmed him in a little bit. I think that his time during the first term, I think his time out of office was a real creative period for him, right? If he were an artist, that would have been his peak because he could just sit around and daydream. And I think that one of the proof points of this was when he won the election in 24, and between November election and January 20 inauguration, when he was interviewing people to go to work for the administration, asking for this personal loyalty pledge, right? Which I believe is illegal, but that's a.
Since when does he care about that?
Since when does anyone care about that? That was not random. That was not small. That was well enforced and ubiquitous. And you weren't getting a job unless you took this this oath, this pledge of loyalty. And it is because he learned that it was the staff that was holding him back. And he just allowed himself to get very, very creative for these 4 years that he was out of office. And he comes in like a ball of fire now. And I think that he senses that his clock is running out. And there are big things that he wants to get done. And I think he has a very, very strange worldview. I have no doubt that he's influenced by, the example that you point out. And as I say, 25 other pain and pressure points. Whether they're lobbyists or donors or just weird people with psychobabble that get into his ear. There are all kinds of strange influences, but I do think a lot of this comes from inside him, stuff that he's had rattling around in his head. Tariffs are an example. He's had weird ideas about tariffs rattling around in his head for a long, long time. And he had just been surrounded by people who hemmed him in to a certain extent. And now he's done with that. Now he's found people, economists and people who are not economists, who are willing to stand in their head and lie and repeat the silliness that he is laying out there in exchange for power. To your point, for these people, he is the cult leader.
Unfortunately, that is very apropos. It does. There's a cult of personality here, and I've never really seen anything like it. And yeah, in a very dismaying sense. Like I'm lamenting all the time, like what I'm seeing online. There's certainly some honest brokers out there, but there's some folks that are just true believers that they are just in that MAGA cult. And no matter what he does, there's always that joke, like these people are like defending pedophiles now, like stay away from the elite pedophiles with a MAGA cap on. Like there's just no there. There's no principle to it. And I had Adam Johnson on the show a while ago, the lectern guy, right? And he explained to me, and it's something I didn't even really know, is that that's just an endemic thing of populism. It's like there's just like there's no core principles. It's all about the team. It's all about what our team is going to do, and it's all about power. It's kind of like
Yeah.
postmodernism. It's
Yeah.
it's literally like there's no truth. It doesn't matter. It's just about power dynamics between groups, and that breaks my brain. Being a principled person, like
I think that's getting close to a definition of populism.
Yeah, fair enough.
It's what you can sell or otherwise push. In a democracy, or what we like to pretend is a democracy, in our republic, it's what you can sell. Anything that you can sell, and once you divorce from a structured sort of intellectual core or intellectual base to your thinking, once you get rid of that, there's a lot more open field running, right? You don't have to be held back. You can, a lot more ad hoc thinking. The left hand and the right hand don't have to know what each other is doing, as long as they're pushing some aspect of your agenda. The agenda doesn't have to be internally consistent. It's easier in some sense, right? It's easier because there are very few, maybe, Brent Freeman, but there are very few people who vote on philosophy, right? People are voting on particular issues, and not a large number. Most people vote on something like one issue, approximately one, somewhere between 0 and 2. But I don't think too many people are out there weighing more than 2 issues and saying, oh boy, I don't know how these fit together, right? This seems inconsistent. Where is the White House going to be going philosophically based on me looking at 3 or 4 or 5 different issues? There are not too many people in that camp. So I think that the successful populist politician just has to figure out the coalition to put together, not in a democratic identity sense, but in the Republican populist has to figure out which buttons to push, right? Not identity buttons necessarily, but which issues. So in Trump's case, get control over the border was huge. As it turns out, polling shows that most Democrats welcome the idea of getting some control over the border between Mexico and the United States. An extraordinarily popular idea. Looking at the polling data, it's hard to believe that no one else was pushing it, right? If you're a populist, and then you throw in there, we're not going to cause wars, and we're not going to spend so much money, so we're going to get inflation down. Man, those are some pretty big buttons to hit. And there is absolutely no need for them to hang together in a philosophically coherent way. Nor for the populace do you have to demonstrate any length of time of commitment to these ideas, right? You don't have to say, well, you can trust me because I've been pushing this for 20 years. In Trump's case, no, I've been pushing this because I said so. And it was so counter to what other people had been saying that he became the one that you could trust, because he was saying things that other people wouldn't say. And this is one of the reasons why I don't blame the American people for a populist coming to power. In no small part, I blame the Republican establishment and the Democratic Party. If you're looking the wrong way, if you're zombieing your way through this, and someone comes and takes your pudding, that's on you. Don't come back these 9 years later and say, whoa, this isn't fair. How did someone steal my pudding? Well, I'm sorry. You walked away. You left the room and you left your pudding on the kitchen table.
Yeah, boy, that's a hell of an assessment. As you were talking, though, I was thinking to myself, what do you think the conversation would have gone like if you, like a year and a half ago, if you would have predicted that Donald Trump would reasonably be planning war, making war plans against Greenland, and just going to steal Greenland from Denmark by force? Like, it's so wild to me that this is actually in the news right now as a distinct possibility. But if you would have said that a year ago, you'd have been told that you were absolutely crazy.
Not only would you have been told you were crazy, but you wouldn't believe it yourself. In other words, if I said, if I could convince you, I'm from the future, trust me, I'm from the future, and here's the piece of paper, this is what happens, right? And for some weird reason, you believe me. You still wouldn't believe it. And I wouldn't believe it as I was handing it to you. We would say, I'm missing a piece of the puzzle, right? Even if I could convince you that these are the words the president's going to be saying, this is the push that's going to happen, you would say, there's a piece of the puzzle. You left out part of the story. You left out Putin said he was going to invade Greenland.
Right.
Right. And therefore Trump said he had to do it first. Or there was some coup in Denmark and Greenland is having its first protest ever and the whole thing is melting down. We had to take it over. Or there's some other piece of the, right? There's no way you would believe it was as simplistic as the president woke up one day and said, I'm going to take over Greenland. Because it's almost impossible.
It sounds insane.
It sounds insane. And this is to your point about populism. And my point about populism is that there doesn't have to be any coherent philosophical structure underpinning this whole thing. It's just ad hoc, completely ad hoc, right? And one of the things that signals that is Stephen Miller, right? If Stephen Miller is your point guy, I think that's your tell that there isn't a philosophical underpinning, right? What? You get home late at night and mom and dad are waiting up and your buddies are dropping you off, right? I'm not saying I haven't experienced this, but trust me, I know something about this, right? And I've seen my kids do it later on. They're in their 30s now, but you know, we've been through this. Okay, 2 a.m, you're finally getting home. You had told mom and dad, I'll be home by midnight. You're screwed, right? You're all of 16 years old. This is going to ruin your month. Someone's got to tell mom and dad. Someone's got to tell mom and dad. You've got a few choices. You can get your sister to do it, right? Because she's really smart and really articulate, and she can make the case Mike meant well, right? He wouldn't have allowed something, right? He's okay. Or you can go with my best friend, Scott, right? Now, Scott's an idiot, but he's charming. I'm telling you, you go with Scott because there is no philosophical underpinning that's going to save your ass. Just go with the guy who's going to say whatever stupid thing needs to be said. Because say what you will about my sister, I could never get her to lie, right? Just too damned honest. But get a couple of beers and a couple of your best friends, you could probably get them to say anything. That's the analogy that comes to my mind when I see, I'm watching, you know, whether it's Fox or CNN, almost doesn't matter, right? Or you're watching one of these goofballs podcasts. You're watching, Stephen Miller comes on. Who's going to defend the president's Greenland case? Oh, it's Stephen Miller. I don't need to know anymore, right? I don't need to know. This is completely ad hoc, right? The president's not going with his equivalent of my sister, who's got to tell the truth and who's going to ask him all kinds of hard questions like why, or how or how am I supposed to explain this? Just go with Stephen. Trust me, we're gonna do this. Stephen's like, I'm your guy. You need someone to tell the American public that this is a good idea, and you don't have any argument to back it up. Who's your guy with two thumbs? Right here, right? He goes out there and he says, with all the indignance that he can muster, no one is going to stand up to the United States militarily if we decide to take over Greenland. That's his argument. Who says Denmark ought to control Greenland? It ought to be the United States. It just ought to be, right? You can't tell me it's easy to find a guy to say that. It's not. If your administration is full of people who are at least intelligent enough to tie their own shoes, right? They can feed themselves. They know how to work a subway and get to their office by 8 o'clock in the morning. If that's in your administration, it's not easy to find someone willing to go in front of a camera and say the things that Stephen Miller is willing to say. He's your guy.
That's depressing, man. I have to ask you this now. I'm doing a hard left here. How do you feel about being attached to the Republican Liberty Caucus or the Republicans in general, going into a midterm where you're trying to move the needle to a more liberty-minded position, and we're trying to get liberty candidates elected, and you're attached to the party that just defended the world's largest pedophilia ring and government blackmail operation in human history? That seems like a tough sell. I think the voters are going to be kind of pissed about that one.
I think the voters are going to be pissed about that one. It's also the party that was calling for the disclosure of the information.
Well, depends on when.
It depends on when. Thank you. It depends on when.
Before the election, they were all about it. But when the chips were down, it was like, okay, Thomas Massie has a discharge petition. All the Republicans ran and hid and said, like, we're actually going to protect pedophiles. We don't want this coming out. And that's a stain, man. That's going to be a tough one.
It is a stain. In fairness, they didn't use that line. They didn't actually say we want to protect pedophiles. Okay.
Well, yeah, but that's what they were doing.
You were making an inference. That's not actually, it wasn't a quote. Okay.
Correct. Okay. That was not a quote. This is my analysis of the situation. Oh my gosh.
So I think that what you're hoping for is that a whole lot of voters, by the way, you're not hoping that a whole lot of voters don't care, right? I don't think that's what you're hoping for one thing, because it's not true. It's not true that a whole lot of voters don't care. But I also don't want the public to become apathetic about it. You know, politics aside, right? Just right and wrong, just ethics. You don't want you don't want the public to stop caring about this. And this is one of the challenges of this issue, is to keep a little bit of attention on it, because I'm afraid, I don't know. I don't know what's in the files, right? But I'm afraid that there might be some there.
Well, know there is, right? They wouldn't be going to these lengths and taking this many black eyes, and because it doesn't do him any good. The longer he tries to slow roll this and come up with these convoluted excuses, and then it's like, now we're going to do redactions, and then like before the files didn't exist, and then now it's like we found 1 million more files, and now there's 5 million, and there's like this thing there. I know they're trying to slow walk it across the midterms, but my God, like people are they're not that dumb, and people understand the game that's being played. And by doing this, you're advertising to the world, even if, and I don't believe that these files are ever going to come out in any meaningful way.
By the way,
I think that they will blow up the whole world before those files come out. That's how deep I think it goes. But that said, like that acknowledgement is like, that tells you how bad the information that's contained in these files actually is, and how damaging it would be. And I think Mike Johnson let it slip. He said, if we release this, we risk overturning the entire political establishment. Like, that's how deep it is. Like, my God, like this is a big
Yeah,
friggin' deal.
I don't think he meant it like that, but
That's what he said.
you do get the impression that was sort of a Freudian slip. Look, I think what you're hoping for is that people realize that the Republican Party is, held in the president's grip to a certain extent, and that grip is loosening, and whatever you're going to be able to get out of the Justice Department, you're going to be able to get out one way or another, and you're just going to have to be patient, and you're going to have to vote on party lines on other issues. We'll see how this works out. I am interested in finding out what polling data show, exit polling coming off of the midterms, right? I'm dying to find out what is it's going to end up motivating people.
I honestly think it's gonna be very much like I said, I'm predicting a complete, Democrat sweep, like, it's gonna be a bloodbath, and I think it's gonna be just a rejection of Trumpism. I think that's it's what it's gonna be. Everyone's gonna come out and say, "We don't like this," and the Democrats will be energized. I think the the videos that we're seeing, a lot of the ICE raids and all these sort of authoritarian type of things, they're gonna energize the Democrats, and I think Republicans, because of things like Epstein, because of things like the endless spending, the new wars, the giant rug pull, and going back on all the promises, I think Republicans are gonna stay home. So I think
The
the
giant
exit
rug pull, that's a great metaphor. I do think that whoever uh, captures the idea of talking about integrity, which shouldn't be an issue because we used to, when I was 13, to bring this conversation full circle, back in those days, it wasn't an issue. You just assumed all politicians had some integrity. But whoever is able to capture that issue and suggest that that's a mantle that they can wear, they're going to be able to make some hay over it. I also think that some certain politicians will be able to make hay over the idea of defeating the effects of really bad polarization. I think that's a very slow train, but I think it's, leaving the station, at least going the right direction. These are non-economic issues that could motivate some people, but politicians need to talk to human beings as though they were human beings, as though, if there's anything to Bill Clinton taught us a couple of things. One is you do have to feel people's pain. You do have to show some empathy, not merely sympathy. And the other one is when you have a sex scandal, you got to get it out in the open and you can still beat it. You can be successful post sex scandal, but it takes a lot of hard work, and you have to be willing to eat a lot of crap and come out of it looking like you're finally going to be honest.
Yeah, and I think that's the opportunity for the RLC candidates. If they could adopt a Massey type of behavior, like genuine integrity, actually having principles, actually wanting to cut spending, actually, like if you could find people that are in that type of mold, I think you could seriously make some inroads because people obviously the appetite is there. If we roll the clock back a year ago, there was massive appetite. Like I said, the mandate for Donald Trump based off of these lies that he campaigned on, it was huge. That's what people
Yeah.
really wanted. So I think
Yeah.
there's definitely an opportunity there. But God, you're going to have to distance yourself from the current Republican establishment. What they've delivered this year, and obviously it's going to be more of the same until the midterms, is just a steaming pile of crap, and people don't want it. They want the other thing that they thought they were voting for originally in 24.
Yeah, they want what they thought they were voting for before. I think that that's well said. I also think that to the extent to which integrity becomes an issue per se, which is an unusual thing, but it could happen, you would be as a candidate actually aided by pissing off some of the establishment, right? Because
Mhm.
that's how you look integrity tough.
Yeah, look what happens with Massey. Every time Trump tries to primary him and feed money to his candidate, like Massey's campaign donations go through the roof. Like, and
Right,
he ends up winning by even a bigger margin. And so
right.
I think that there is a model. Like, there's a model for doing
Yeah.
this. I
Yeah.
just don't know why there's not more.
Yeah. You got to appreciate the little shit, don't you?
Man, he's a tough son of a bitch, that's for sure.
He's a
I mean,
tough son of a bitch. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm definitely a
I
fan. I don't
find him
even
very
vote, but I like
impressive.
he's like my favorite person in Congress. He's like the this
Yeah. I
generation's Ron
find him
Paul
very
for sure.
impressive. I think it's interesting that he's intellectually ahead of, the rest of that group. Not that not that they're all
It's a
setting the
low
bar too
bar.
high. Right. Um, and at the same time, massive integrity that allows him to withstand this pressure. I don't think those things go hand in hand. I think that that's a coincidence. It makes him really unique and really interesting.
Yeah, so do you have any RLC candidates, that are sort of in that vein you'd like to advertise for here? Because I have to say I'm pretty ignorant, like, 'cause I'm not political, I don't vote, I'm outside of the whole thing.
We do. I am not allowed to talk about it for another 2 weeks.
Mm.
But we do. We just had a board meeting today. We had a couple of very interesting conversations that we really look forward to talking about in a couple of weeks. I think you're going to be excited.
Cool. I would like to be excited because politics doesn't usually excite me. It depresses me and angers me. So I would be excited to see what you got, man.
We're going to save the world, Brent. We're going to save the world.
Well, hey, I'm vibing with that message. And I will say this to my audience, and I've said it a million times, is that the way you change the world is by changing yourself. If you sort of keep your locus of control at yourself and then to your family and then to your local community and sort of outwards, I think you have a lot more control than you think. There's that old meme. It's like, hey, you can just do things. I think far too few people realize you could just do things, and they think that I need to control my politician in DC, and that's really the mechanism for fixing my life and getting all unscrewed. I disagree. I think that it's up to each and every one of us to change, but that's where I go back to the responsibility piece. Why I think people don't like liberty is because it does require changing yourself, improving yourself, getting better as a human being across all dimensions. It's much easier to just point at some shitty politician who's obviously terrible and say like they're the cause of all my problems. It's not me, and that trap people fall into oftentimes is something I wholeheartedly reject.
I like the philosophical direction in which you're going. One of the things that depresses me about politics is the extent to which it's so discouraging for young people. And in different ways. You know, uh, I'm old enough to remember when the church played a larger role in our society.
Mm.
The church, more broadly defined, right? And one of the one of the things I lament about the fall of the church, not that it's fallen completely, but it obviously plays a much less important role than it used to. One of the things that bothers me about it is the extent to which politics, government has, in no small part, filled a lot of that vacuum, right? And done so in a way that is very undermining to, ironically, free thought. I don't think that most people would argue that churches were established in order to foster free thought, but certainly the vacuum that the receding church has allowed has been filled with this idea of team think, right? Of group think that is very, very depressing, not only in terms of sapping us of the responsibility of thinking for oneself, but the whole notion that our society is set up, everything you see in TV, our society seems to have become set up to revolve around politics and the massive role that our federal government plays, and to a smaller extent, other government entities play in our lives. And all of the conversation is a zero-sum battle. Our whole society our whole communications apparatus seems to revolve around these totally depressing concepts, in contrast to taking responsibility for yourself and the extent to which your life can grow. I used to, 100,000 years ago, I used to spend a lot of time talking about how the world changed with the Enlightenment and with our understanding of economics, Adam Smith, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
So many folks seem to have forgotten or never learned. I fear that it's forgotten how economics works. That through cooperation, we build income, we build wealth. When Barack Obama said, I'll probably get the quote slightly wrong, but you'll get the idea. It wouldn't be such a bad thing to spread the wealth around, right? He was talking about this.
Redistribute.
Redistribute. That was not a Freudian slip. He really saw the world differently than someone who studied economics and understood what we used to call growth theory, but it's just how the world actually works, is that you build an economy, you develop an economy through this notion that Adam Smith introduced to us all of individuals and individual decision makers adding value. Each individual person is adding value, and through the free market exchange process, we build an economy, we develop it, we grow. It's not a matter of someone gets ahead by taking something from someone else, which is, of course, the fundamental underpinning behind underneath Marxism. It just feels as though, not in an economic sense, but it definitely, the world feels as though far too many people are stuck in this notion of, for me to get ahead, someone else has to fail.
Well, that's what they see, Mike. That's their experience. Is we see, by virtue of not having a free market, not having true capitalism, having this sort of cronyism whereby we see it is a zero sum game to some degree. I mean, the pie is growing, but the share of the pie that sort of is filtered to the very, very tippity top, that keeps increasing. And you have Elon is almost, he's going to be the first trillionaire, and they see all of this happening, and they see it's so transparent and it's so in the open, this sort of corruption and this government putting their finger on the scale and actually taking from the poor people. And like COVID was a great example. Like all these regulations, like what's an essential business, like let's shut down mom and pop and funnel all the money to Walmart and Amazon. Like people see that. You have these establishments, your restaurants, and these small mom and pop shops that were,
and it undermines your ability to look beyond that and say, if I take responsibility for my own life, I can build a future.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes it so easy to stoke, for like the left folks, to stoke the hatred of the rich, right? It is such an easy thing to prick in people when people have this fundamental experience that it's just not fair, and they feel it and they see it and they viscerally know that it's unfair. They want to rip it down, and that's something that I think is just a caustic, thing that's built into people. But it's one of the most easy things for politicians to stoke, that envy,
Very,
that
very
idea
dangerous.
that
Very
there's
dangerous.
fixed pie, and somebody else taking more means you're getting less. Like that is so easy. That's how Mondami got there.
That's exactly right. It's very, very dangerous.
All right, man. Well, we are right up at time. I don't want to take any more of your time, but it's been a fantastic conversation. I really
It's
enjoyed
so
getting
good to
to know
talk to you, Brent.
Yes, sir. Let's keep in touch, man. I'm really interested. I'm gonna keep my eye on the RLC. Send me some information when you have candidates coming out. Like I said, I'm not a voter, but I'll at least take a look. And I don't want to be the eternal
Well,
wet
you're
blanket on the
not a
party.
voter right now, but we'll see about the future. We'll see about the
Boy,
future.
Boy, we'll see. I'll never say no. Actually, the latest thing I said was like I might show up in the midterms and vote all Democrat. Like that is like my latest, like the closest I've gotten to voting. So maybe I can be changed out of that and
Oh
go a
boy, yeah,
different
maybe you
direction.
better stay home. Maybe it's not quite ready for you to vote yet.
I wouldn't actually do that. That's just that's how frustrated I am with this current
I get it.
administration, man. I wouldn't actually do that. But
I get it.
anyway, hey, why don't you tell people where to find you in case they are not aware?
Look, my email address is mike@miketermott.com. You can find some stuff about some of the stuff that we're doing at miketermott.com. You can go to rlc.org, Republican Liberty Caucus, rlc.org. I would love it if, folks want to reach out to me directly by email, for example. We're on all the social media channels too. We've got projects going on that are very exciting that I think people are really going to enjoy seeing coming out of our team this spring, and we're going to have a lot of fun things to talk about. By the way, one of the things that we didn't talk about, I'll just give a plug here right now. We've been starting a little podcast ourselves called Liberty Lens. And you can find stuff about Liberty Lens, especially in our YouTube channel, but on other social media channels as well. And I do that with a buddy, Big John, and we have some fun with it. We pick a political topic each week and talk about it. So it gets a little bit nerdly, but it's very fun, and it's a fast listen. So if folks are into that, there's another opportunity.
Awesome. Yeah, you heard it, people. Check it out. Look for the Liberty Lens and check out all of Mike's socials. He's a good follow. Thank you so much again, man. I really appreciate the time, and we'll chat later.
Good to see you. Take care.
Yes, sir. Bye bye.